always has been, and he doesn't need an introduction. Honestly, he's a he's a luminary in defense. Basically, that's how I see at him. And this book he wrote, Operation Sindoor. I was honored to be on the launch of this book as well, and sir was there. So, sir, I would like to begin with Operation Sindoor. And how was this different from the rest of the operations like Balakot or like cross-surgical LOC strikes in terms of how we responded to Pakistan's terror attacks, or you can say terror plots?
So, firstly, good morning, and I must thank the organizers for inviting me to this Lit Fest. I've spent a lot of time in Kashmir, but the bulk of it has been spent in knocking off militants. So, this is the first time I'm here in a Lit Fest. So it's wonderful to be here. The second point I'd like to make is that this book is a joint effort.
With General Katoch, yes. And he's not here.
There are two authors. I asked him to come, but he had some other engagements. And it's in three parts. So those of you who are seriously interested in national security, wish to make it a career, I'd strongly encourage you to read this book. Because the first two parts trace back the origins of this conflict. What led to these 88 hours which redefined deterrence. So it's about the architecture of conflict, the idea of Pakistan, how it metamorphosed into an ideological divide, the descent into radicalization, and finally how Pakistan realized that terror was a great tool in your statecraft. So this Sindoor was an answer to the last question, that if you make terror a central tool in your statecraft, this is how the Indian state will respond. And why, you asked, Sindoor is so significant. I spent, 44 years in the army. And we always hit Pakistan on maps. हमने रायगढ़ को मारा, रावलपिंडी को मारा, पर मैप में मारा. I think it is since 2014 when the Indian state decided that we must demonstrate new normals in our strategic outlook. देखिए उससे पहले होता क्या था? When Parliament was struck, what happened? India's Parliament, and we mobilized in response. You'd recall it was Parakram. But what narrative did Pakistan spin? Pakistan told the West that, listen, India now is stirring conflict in a nuclear environment. And if India is stirring conflict in a nuclear environment, it is India which is irresponsible. So what Parakram did was that, I look at it in two ways, Sindoor. Sindoor is both a benchmark and it is a springboard. So how is it a benchmark? It is a benchmark because, as the book heading says, it redefined deterrence. In what way? It demonstrated new normals in our strategic outlook. That if you hit us, we'll hit you back and hit you harder. So it begins with the surgical strikes, then Balakot. But this time what we did, we hit them so hard that on the 10th of May, the state was battered, defenses were shattered. It was helpless. The leadership was humiliated. They went begging for mercy through international interlocutors. And military to military, I have no doubt that the message has gone that if you want to fight a fair fight, we will still fight it. But if you use terror as a tool of your statecraft, we will give it back to you. In that sense, I think it redefined deterrence. In some ways, I hope it's not an exaggeration, but these 88 hours did what 70 or 70 odd years before that could not possibly do.
But so, given the way the nature of Pakistan's state is, and natures seldom change, I don't see, I don't foresee that Pakistan is going to hold back for a very long time. There will be a time when they will try to perpetrate another terror attack, and We can see the signs already; they are coming. My question to you is that when we always talk about the two-front war when it comes to Pakistan, which is China and Pakistan versus us. And in Sindoor also we saw that that China did provide Pakistan with I would say, a sort of backing, military backing by using their satellite images and rail tracking, the way the Chinese equipment was there. Uh, how do you see where the shortcomings do we see that going forward in a conflict which is going to be prolonged? Because next time the terror attacks happen, I don't think they go begging for mercy and will stop.
What happened to the nuclear arsenal?
Not only to them but to the Americans as well.
So it crossed every red line. But yet we must not make light of the nuclear matter. I mean, nuclear weapons are a matter of great responsibility. We never waved the nuclear rattle. But that doesn't mean we don't have a nuclear arsenal. But so this is all nuclear bluffs. It scares the amateurs in the business, it doesn't scare the professionals. Having said that, see, my view of India's threat calculus is this. I can't see a country which has a grimmer threat calculus than India. I mean, look, to the north we have one of the most powerful militaries in the world. The military component of that power differential is $450 billion. They have a very formidable rocket force. So I'm not undermining the threat. I think we have already started doing it. If not, we should. Pakistan and China should be viewed as one integrated theatre. They are not two separate theatres. And there are many arguments. And so, see, one of the other arguments of this book on Sindoor is that we must use it as a springboard to complete our national security makeover. So we've just begun with the CDS, DMA, Atmanirbharta and defense, but we have a huge way to go. But all I'm saying is that in that threat calculus, Pakistan is but a pest. Our economy is 10 times its size, its GDP is less than the market cap of the Bombay Stock Exchange. So why does Pakistan bother us so much? It should not. Having said that, as I say, that I'm a big votary of reform, national security transformation, and what kind of military do we want? It's not a military to jackboot around the world. This is a professional military under total civilian control. So you decide what I do. But I must create capacities to expand your political options. So let me say this, going forward, should we create combat overmatch with Pakistan? And I'm not being jingoistic, but if we invest in the right space, cyber capacities, next time there is a problem, and if the political bosses so decide, we could lift Hafiz Saeed, just like Maduro was lifted from Venezuela. We could decapitate many of these leaders. And I'm reiterating, this is not jingoism. This is just to tell you that we are a sophisticated force which can take you out, just as the Americans do. But we are under political control. It's a political decision. So I would like to make, that kind of distinction. Pakistan's problem is it must decide where it wants to go. What does it want to do? I cannot imagine a state whose overarching purpose is to strike terror, kill innocents in the neighborhood. What kind of state is that? India has no kind of those aspirations.
Pakistan is a state like that. That's the nature of the state. That's what they survive on, basically terror. That's the only economy they have. Otherwise, it's a collapsed country. Take the nuclear out of Pakistan, it will be worse than Somalia. And that's how it's going to be. But my next question is, sir, when we talk about building, overarching military capability over Pakistan. Now, if we see conflicts between Russia and Ukraine, and then we see what has happened in West Asia, where Iran has been able to, I would say, to great extent and successfully been able to deter US from running route in that region. Where do you see India's capability and the capacity in terms of an integrated theater against China and Pakistan? And where do you see, when you talk about building national security, how do we invest our future technologies, and where are we really we should be looking at and pointing out that we have that capability in the next 2 decades? We should be up there where the world really wants India to see.
So, in terms of weight and influence, I think India is very well poised. So just let me give you some data points. Our economy was the fourth largest, it's now dipped to 5 or something, but we'll recover. So at least in, I mean not in per capita terms, but in terms of size, we are in a pretty decent place. The Lowy Institute came out with a report on comprehensive national power, and I was quite surprised to find that India is rated just below USA and China. There is nobody else. So just think of it. We are in the big league. Swami Vivekananda never failed to remind us that the world is but a gymnasium where nations come to make themselves strong. So in this big league, we are going to face brutal geopolitics, and it will be very unforgiving. The third data point is that Stanford came out with a report recently which rates India as number 3 in AI competitiveness. Artificial intelligence is the future. So I make this point that in many metrics of weight and influence, we are now in the big power game. So we have to step up our game in national security and thinking. I see so many young students here. The talented amongst you must come to national security. National security today is an H1 game. The best minds, the best strategies, the best philosophies. In that sense, if we are to be honest, we have a long, long way to go. So this business of Viksit Bharat is not guaranteed. We have to secure our eyes. And if we have to secure our eyes, we have to invest in technologies, invest in national security reform, invest in the military. You pointed out Iran. Iran has brought out the whole value of combat symmetry. A Shahid today is as potent as the tomahawk. And the Shahid, I'm told, what every dollar that the Iranians are investing, the West has to invest $28 to intercept it. So I mean, there are all kinds of things: technology, combat asymmetry, our strategizing. So we are number 3. We are in the big league. This is a brutal world. It will make eminent sense to secure ourselves by way of integrated deterrence. But the point that I'm making is, I'm not making a case for war fighting. The most sensible thing to do is to create capacities to deter. कि आप ना कोई आंख उठा के देखने की हिम्मत भी ना करें.
So my next question would be on the youngsters. And you know, we have seen, I think Israel is the only country which has a unit 22 or something, where their tech is very high. In a sense that their national security is led by 21, 22, 23-year-old kids. Literally for us they're kids, but they are the ones who are the ace in Israeli defense technology. How do we see that, how can we invest the same kind of energy and potential in the youth of India to bring them at par at that technology level? Because if we look at our startups, we do have a great number of startups. We have fantastic unicorns, but I think that when it comes to defense, ICDS is a great platform. But then, what suggestions would you put out for ICDS to basically make it more potent for the youngsters to come in and be a part of the national security doctrine or national security umbrella for the country?
So since you are speaking about youth, the Indian Army has a maxim which says that think like a man of action, act like a man of thought. So those in this audience who think like this, if you can think in this action mode and action and thinking mode, the Indian military is a carrier for you. And having served 44 years, I'll tell you that the military needs the best and the brightest. So that's the first point. I don't represent the Army's recruitment organization, but as a general point, we'd love to have the best and the brightest in the Indian military. The other issue that you made about youth, can you name to me the generals in Ukraine? The Russians and the Ukrainians have been at each other's throat for 5 to 6 years now. 5 years.
5 years now.
So name one general in Ukraine.
I don't remember the names.
So 71 you had Sam Manekshaw, World War II you had Patton. Because the generals of Ukraine, as you rightly remarked, are Palmer Luckey, Alex Carr, Elon Musk. So that's why we need our youth. So, there's this guy called Palmer Luckey. He's now the CEO of a company called Endural, or a startup called Endural. Till 8 years back, he was playing with VR headsets. Playing. This year, he has churned out a plane. It is actually an autonomous fighter jet, AI-enabled, lethal, unmanned. And in the competition for this bid, he beat Boeing and Lockheed. And he has churned out this platform in 568 days. Aramco still talks of 10 years. So this is why we need youth. This is why we need talent. And there's another guy called Alex Karp. He's written a book called The Technology Republic, in which he's telling people from Silicon Valley to start wasting their time on photo sharing apps and dating apps, but come and push deep technology. So I'm no Alex Karp, but I'd like to make a simpler appeal. We want the youth to come into this business of national security and build these autonomous fighter jets. National security is a public good. It secures you. And I'm not talking of national security in a narrow sense. National security means prosperity, it means technological progress, it also means military readiness. So in this sense, I agree with you totally. And just yesterday I was thinking, we have a huge engineering community in the armed forces, but that engineering community needs these technology geeks, the Palmer Luckies, the guys with Hawaiian shirts, but who make fantastic technology. And I think that's exactly what India needs in the future.
And for the youth, just because you think national security is Desh Bhakti and you won't get a career out of it, it's millions of dollars worth of money.
It's more than Desh Bhakti, it's millions of dollars, it demands great intellect. So if you are the best and the brightest, come. If you are not, go elsewhere.
Yeah. Sir, my last question to you would be that in your book you have written that we need to warrant US role in during Operation Sindoor, because when Vice President J.D. Vance was here, he was very clear that he's not going to, they're not going to interfere. But then when Pakistan launched Operation Banyan Manus, or Marus, or whatever you want to call it, we did see the Americans playing a very shady role with us. And going forward also, we don't expect anything better from the Americans. If at all, Henry Kissinger's words that, Americans, allies have to be more worried about America is really coming true this time as well. So how do you see India safeguarding itself from the US meddling as well as the influence or the kind of disturbance they try to create? And second is, with both US and China as potential adversaries in terms of geopolitics, when it comes to Pakistan, how much space do we have to deal with Pakistan the way we really want to deal with Pakistan?
So, the first point is about the Americans. I'm not sure of the name, but I think it was Ambassador Chester Bowles, who I think in the 50s advised his own countrymen by saying that it is bad mathematics to befriend what, I don't know what the population then was, 11 million Pakistanis against 80 million Indians. It's just bad mathematics. The Americans should get it. Secondly, what is Pakistan and what is India? So Condoleezza Rice said that India's rise is in the interest of the United States. Those are wise words. If these two democracies can come together in positive terms, what do we need from the Americans? We don't need your treasure, we don't need your blood. We just need a little bit of technology. If we come together, that would be the smartest balancing of China. So the Americans need to see it. And I think Marco Rubio's recent trip seemed to suggest that they are regretting what they did post-Sindoor. Pakistan kya hai ki Pakistan can recommend Trump for the Nobel Prize. India doesn't do these kind of silly things. We will not recommend you for the Nobel Prize. But if you wish to come together, there are many things that we could do together. I am in fact a big votary of Indo-US cooperation, because in the whole technology realm, innovation, America is a fantastic country. It's a good country to make friends with. But it has to be done on equal terms, you have to realize that India is no pushover. It will not recommend you for the Nobel Prize. Oh.
True, because Peter Hegseth today has said the same thing, that India is a very critical partner in the Indo-Pacific theatre. But I'll tell you something, sir. I'm really, really honored to get your book, and I have read it. And there are about 3 to 4 books which have been published on Operation Sindoor. But by far, as a critical journalist, because I'm somebody who critically analyzes the literature which comes out there, that's a part of my job. This book is a really, really good book. So if you are interested in knowing India's future, this is something you really ought to get. I thank you, sir. I thank you a lot for this.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you for the great conversation.